Marcus Thompson had always been the responsible one in the family. At 32, he worked as a software engineer at a tech startup, lived in a modest apartment in Portland, and religiously attended every family gathering. His parents, Robert and Linda Thompson, had raised 4 children with varying degrees of success. Marcus was the steady middle child, sandwiched between his older sister Victoria, younger sister Amanda, and baby brother Jake. The Thompson family had a tradition of Sunday dinners at their parents' sprawling suburban home. Every week, the siblings would gather around the mahogany dining table their father had built 20 years ago, sharing stories about their lives while their mother fussed over everyone's plates. It was during one of these dinners in early March that Robert Thompson made an announcement that would change everything. "Linda and I have been talking," Robert began, setting down his fork and looking around the table at his 4 adult children. "We've decided to do something special for our 40th wedding anniversary this year. We're going on a family cruise to the Caribbean, and we want all of you to come with us." The response was immediate and enthusiastic. Jake, fresh out of college and working his first job at a marketing firm, practically bounced in his seat. "Are you serious? That's amazing. When are we talking about?" Amanda, a nurse at the local hospital, grinned widely and started asking about dates and logistics. Even Victoria, typically the more reserved of the siblings, seemed genuinely excited about the prospect. Marcus felt his heart swell with happiness. Family vacations had become rare as they'd all gotten older and busier with their own lives. The idea of a week together on a cruise ship, exploring different islands, sharing meals and making memories, felt like exactly what they all needed. "This is incredible, Dad," he said, reaching over to squeeze his father's shoulder. "I can't remember the last time we all went somewhere together." Robert smiled, his weathered face creasing with joy. "That's exactly why we want to do this. Life's too short, and we want to celebrate not just our anniversary, but our family. We've already started looking at cruise lines and dates. We're thinking maybe late August or early September when the weather's still good but the summer crowds have died down." Linda nodded enthusiastically. "I've been researching different ships and itineraries. There's this beautiful 7-day cruise that stops in Jamaica, Cozumel, and the Bahamas. The ship has everything: pools, restaurants, shows, even a rock climbing wall for you adventurous kids." The conversation continued for another hour, with everyone contributing ideas and suggestions. Marcus found himself getting caught up in the planning, already imagining himself lounging on the ship's deck with a book, or exploring ancient ruins with his family. He started thinking about taking time off work, maybe extending the trip by a few days to really make the most of it. As the evening wound down and the siblings began to disperse to their respective homes, Marcus felt a warm glow of anticipation. This cruise would be more than just a vacation. It would be a chance to reconnect with his family, to create new memories that would last a lifetime. He hugged his parents extra tight that night, already counting down the days until their Caribbean adventure. Victoria hugged their parents goodbye and headed out to her BMW, her designer handbag slung over her shoulder. At 35, she was the oldest Thompson sibling and had always carried herself with an air of sophistication that sometimes bordered on superiority. She worked as a marketing director for a luxury hotel chain, lived in an upscale condo downtown, and had cultivated a lifestyle that she felt befitted her position. As Marcus gathered his things and prepared to leave, he couldn't help but notice the subtle change in Victoria's demeanor. During dinner, she'd seemed genuinely excited about the cruise, asking thoughtful questions about the itinerary and even suggesting some high-end restaurants they might want to try on the ship. But now, as she stood by her car in the driveway, there was something different in her expression, a calculating look that Marcus had seen before but couldn't quite place. "This is going to be amazing," Marcus said as he approached his own car, a reliable Honda Civic that he'd been driving for 5 years. "I'm already thinking about what books I want to bring, and maybe I'll finally try that rock climbing wall Mom mentioned." Victoria glanced at him with what might have been amusement. "Oh, Marcus," she said, her voice carrying a tone that he couldn't quite interpret. "You're so enthusiastic about everything. It's sweet." There was something in the way she said "sweet" that made Marcus pause. It wasn't necessarily condescending, but it wasn't entirely sincere either. He'd noticed over the years that Victoria had developed a habit of speaking to him and their younger siblings in a way that felt slightly patronizing, as if she were indulging children rather than talking to her adult brothers and sister. "Well, yeah," Marcus replied, feeling slightly defensive. "Why wouldn't I be enthusiastic? This is the first family vacation we've planned in years. It's going to be incredible to spend that much time together, just the six of us." Victoria's smile didn't quite reach her eyes. "Of course it will be," she said, but there was something in her tone that suggested she knew something he didn't. "I'm sure you'll have a wonderful time, Marcus. You always do." The conversation felt oddly stilted, and Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that Victoria was holding back something important. But before he could press her further, she had already gotten into her car and was backing out of the driveway. As her tail lights disappeared down the street, Marcus stood there for a moment, trying to understand what had just happened. The feeling nagged at him during the drive home, but by the time he reached his apartment, he'd convinced himself that he was reading too much into a simple exchange. Victoria had always been a bit reserved, and maybe she was just processing the excitement of the trip in her own way. After all, she'd seemed genuinely engaged during dinner, asking about cabin arrangements and shore excursions. Marcus spent the next few weeks throwing himself into research mode, which was typical for his analytical personality. He spent hours reading cruise reviews, comparing different cabin categories, and researching the ports they'd be visiting. He created spreadsheets tracking prices, made lists of activities he wanted to try, and even started a shared Google Doc where the family could collaborate on planning. His enthusiasm was infectious, and soon Jake and Amanda were contributing their own ideas to the document. Jake was particularly excited about the ship's nightlife and entertainment options, while Amanda was researching spa treatments and fitness classes. Even their parents got involved, with Robert adding notes about shore excursions and Linda researching the ship's dining options. The only person who seemed oddly absent from the planning process was Victoria. Marcus had shared the Google Doc with her, but she never added any comments or suggestions. When he mentioned it during their weekly family text chain, she simply responded with, "I'm sure whatever you all plan will be fine." It wasn't like Victoria to be so hands-off about something that involved detailed planning and coordination. She was typically the type of person who had opinions about everything and wasn't shy about expressing them. Her sudden lack of input felt strange, but Marcus attributed it to her busy work schedule. As a marketing director, she was probably dealing with quarterly reports and budget planning. As April rolled into May, the cruise planning kicked into high gear. Robert had narrowed down their options to 2 specific ships and itineraries, and the family needed to make a decision soon to secure cabins at a reasonable price. Marcus found himself taking on more of the coordination role, which felt natural given his project management experience at work. During a particularly productive family planning session over video call, Marcus laid out the 2 main options. "Okay, so we've got the Royal Caribbean ship that does Jamaica, Cozumel, and Nassau, versus the Norwegian ship that hits Barbados, St. Thomas, and Half Moon Cay. The Royal Caribbean option is about $200 cheaper per person, but the Norwegian ship has better reviews for food and entertainment." The family spent nearly an hour debating the merits of each option, with Jake advocating for the Norwegian ship's better nightlife and Amanda preferring the Royal Caribbean's excursion options. Their parents seemed happy with either choice, just grateful that their children were so engaged in the planning process. Throughout the discussion, Marcus noticed that Victoria was unusually quiet. She joined the call but seemed distracted, occasionally typing on her phone or looking away from the camera. When he directly asked for her input, she simply said, "Whatever the majority decides is fine with me." Robert Thompson was getting increasingly excited about the cruise as the planning progressed. At 65, he'd worked for 30 years as a high school principal before retiring 2 years earlier. The transition to retirement had been more challenging than he'd expected, and Linda had been encouraging him to find activities that would give him a sense of purpose and excitement. This family cruise had become exactly that kind of project. Robert threw himself into researching every detail, from the ship's amenities to the history of each port they'd visit. He started collecting brochures and printing out articles about Caribbean culture, creating a folder that grew thicker each week. "I think we should book the Norwegian ship," Robert announced during their next Sunday dinner. "I've been reading reviews, and the consensus seems to be that their food is superior, and their entertainment options are more diverse. Plus, the itinerary includes St. Thomas, which has that famous gondola ride to Paradise Point." Linda nodded enthusiastically. "I've been looking at the cabin options, and I think we should try to get rooms on the same deck, or at least close to each other. It would be nice to be able to easily visit back and forth." Marcus had been thinking the same thing. "That's a great idea, Mom. I was looking at the deck plans, and if we book soon, we might be able to get 3 cabins in a row on deck 7. The prices are still reasonable, and it's high enough to have good ocean views but not so high that it's constantly crowded." The conversation continued with everyone contributing ideas and preferences. Jake wanted to make sure they had dinner reservations at the ship's specialty restaurants, while Amanda was interested in booking spa appointments in advance. The energy around the table was palpable, with everyone clearly looking forward to the adventure. Victoria participated in the conversation, but Marcus continued to notice something subtle in her demeanor. She seemed to be going through the motions of enthusiasm, without the genuine excitement that everyone else was displaying. When Jake made a joke about trying to win big at the ship's casino, Victoria's laugh felt forced. When Amanda suggested they all try the rock-climbing wall together, Victoria's smile seemed practiced rather than spontaneous. Marcus tried to push aside his growing sense of unease. Maybe Victoria was just processing the trip differently than the rest of them. She'd always been more reserved, more cautious about getting too excited about things before they were finalized. It was entirely possible that she was just protecting herself from disappointment by maintaining some emotional distance until the cruise was actually booked and paid for. After dinner, as the family was cleaning up and preparing to leave, Marcus found himself alone in the kitchen with Victoria. She was helping Linda load the dishwasher while the rest of the family had moved to the living room to continue discussing cruise details. "Are you okay?" Marcus asked quietly, not wanting to alert their mother to his concerns. "You seem a little distant about the whole cruise thing." Victoria glanced at him with what might have been surprise. "I'm fine, Marcus. Just trying to be realistic about the logistics. It's a big trip, and there are a lot of moving parts." "But you are excited about it, right?" Marcus pressed. "I mean, it's going to be incredible. When's the last time all 6 of us spent a week together?" Victoria's expression was difficult to read. "Of course I'm excited," she said, but her tone was neutral, almost careful. "It's just, well, let's just make sure everyone's expectations are aligned before we get too carried away with the planning." The comment felt oddly ominous, and Marcus was about to ask what she meant when Linda returned to the kitchen, effectively ending their private conversation. But Victoria's words stuck with him as he drove home that night. What did she mean about expectations being aligned? Was there something about the cruise planning that he wasn't understanding? Over the next few days, Marcus found himself replaying that conversation in his head. Victoria's comment about expectations felt like a warning, but he couldn't figure out what she might be trying to warn him about. The cruise planning seemed to be going smoothly, with everyone contributing ideas and his parents clearly excited about the prospect of a family vacation. Marcus decided to reach out to Victoria directly to see if he could understand her concerns better. He sent her a text message asking if she wanted to grab coffee sometime that week to talk about the cruise details. Her response was polite but non-committal. "I'm pretty swamped with work this week, but I'm sure whatever you all decide will be great." The response only increased Marcus's sense that something was off. Victoria had never been one to shy away from planning or decision-making, especially when it came to family events. Her sudden hands-off approach felt completely out of character. Marcus decided to try a different approach. Instead of asking Victoria directly about her concerns, he reached out to Amanda to see if she'd noticed anything strange about their older sister's behavior. Amanda was typically the most observant of the siblings when it came to family dynamics, and she had a good relationship with Victoria. "Now that you mention it," Amanda said when Marcus called her, "Victoria has been a little weird about the cruise stuff. Like, she's not contributing ideas the way she usually does. Remember when we were planning Mom's surprise birthday party last year? Victoria had opinions about everything, from the color of the decorations to the flavor of the cake. But with this cruise, she's been super passive." Amanda's observation confirmed Marcus's suspicions. "Do you think she's having second thoughts about going?" he asked. "I don't know," Amanda replied. "Maybe she's worried about the cost. I mean, even with Mom and Dad paying for the cruise itself, there are still expenses for flights, shore excursions, drinks, and all that. Maybe she's stressed about the money." It was a reasonable theory, but Marcus wasn't entirely convinced. Victoria made good money at her job, and she'd never been shy about spending on travel or experiences. Just last year, she'd taken a 2-week vacation to Europe that had cost significantly more than her portion of the cruise would. As May turned into June, the cruise planning reached a critical point. Robert had found a great deal on the Norwegian ship for their preferred dates in late August, but they needed to book within the next week to secure the cabins and prices. Marcus created a group text with all the siblings to coordinate final decisions and payment arrangements. The response from Jake and Amanda was immediate and enthusiastic. Both confirmed they could get the time off work and were ready to book as soon as their parents gave the go-ahead. Marcus also confirmed his availability and started looking into flights from Portland to Miami, where they'd be departing from. Victoria's response to the group text was notably different. Instead of the excitement and logistical questions that characterized her siblings' messages, she simply wrote, "Let me check my calendar and get back to you." Marcus stared at his phone, reading and rereading Victoria's message. "Let me check my calendar." They'd been planning this cruise for months, discussing dates and logistics at every family gathering. How could she not already know whether she was available? The next few days passed without any follow-up from Victoria. Marcus watched the group text chain, waiting for her to confirm her availability or ask questions about the booking process. Jake and Amanda continued to share their excitement, with Jake posting links to the ship's entertainment schedule and Amanda researching spa packages. Finally, Marcus decided to call Victoria directly. The call went straight to voicemail, which was unusual. Victoria typically answered her phone, especially during business hours when she'd be at her desk. Marcus left a message asking her to call him back about the cruise booking, but he didn't hear from her for 2 days. When Victoria finally returned his call, her tone was professional and distant. "Sorry, I missed your call," she said without elaborating on why she hadn't responded sooner. "I've been incredibly busy with a major client presentation." "No problem," Marcus replied, though he was starting to feel frustrated. "I was just wondering about your availability for the cruise. Dad found a great deal, but we need to book this week to secure it." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "Marcus," Victoria said finally, "I need to be honest with you about something." The tone of her voice made Marcus's stomach drop. "What's going on?" "I've been trying to find a way to tell you this, but there's been a change in plans regarding the cruise." Victoria's words were measured, as if she'd rehearsed them. "Mom and Dad have decided to make some adjustments to the guest list." Marcus felt confused. What kind of adjustments? Are they inviting other family members? "Not exactly," Victoria said, and Marcus could hear her taking a deep breath. "They've decided that the cruise should be limited to immediate family members who are married or have significant others. Since you're the only one who's still single, they thought it might be better if you didn't come." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. He felt his breath catch in his throat, and for a moment he couldn't process what Victoria had just said. "What?" he managed to say finally. "I'm sorry, Marcus. I know this is hard to hear, but Mom and Dad want this to be a couple's trip. Jake is bringing his girlfriend Sarah, Amanda is bringing her husband, Mike, and I'm bringing David. They feel like you might feel left out being the only single person." Marcus's mind was reeling. But this was supposed to be a family cruise. When did this become about couples? And why didn't Mom and Dad tell me this themselves? "They asked me to talk to you because they thought it would be easier coming from me," Victoria said, her voice remaining carefully neutral. "They're worried about hurting your feelings, but they want the trip to be romantic and couple-focused." Marcus felt a mixture of hurt, anger, and confusion washing over him. "Victoria, we've been planning this for months. I've been doing research, helping coordinate everything. How is this suddenly about couples?" "I understand you're upset," Victoria said, "but try to see it from their perspective. They want to celebrate their anniversary with their children and their children's partners. It's not personal, Marcus. It's just the way they've decided to structure the trip." Marcus ended the call feeling completely bewildered. Nothing about Victoria's explanation made sense. Throughout all the months of planning, there had never been any mention of the cruise being couples-focused. In fact, Jake's girlfriend Sarah had only been mentioned in passing, and Marcus wasn't even sure they were serious enough for a family vacation. Something about Victoria's story felt off, but Marcus couldn't quite put his finger on what it was. The logical part of his brain told him that his parents wouldn't suddenly exclude him from a family trip without talking to him directly. But the emotional part of his brain was already processing the hurt and rejection of being left out. Marcus spent the rest of the day in a haze of confusion and pain. He kept replaying the conversation with Victoria, trying to understand how a family cruise had suddenly become a couple's retreat. The more he thought about it, the less sense it made. That evening, Marcus decided to call his parents directly. If they had really made this decision, he wanted to hear it from them. But when he called the house, Linda answered and seemed genuinely surprised to hear from him. "Marcus, honey, how are you? I was just thinking about you earlier. Your father found the most amazing shore excursion in St. Thomas that I think you'd love. It's a historical tour of the island that includes some of the old sugar plantations." Marcus felt even more confused. "Mom, I just got off the phone with Victoria. She said there's been a change in plans about the cruise." "A change in plans?" Linda sounded genuinely puzzled. "What kind of change? We're all set to book the Norwegian ship this week." "She said you and Dad decided to make it a couple's trip, and that I shouldn't come because I'm single." The silence on the other end of the phone was deafening. "Marcus," Linda said finally, her voice tight with what sounded like anger, "I have no idea what Victoria told you, but your father and I have made no such decision. This is a family cruise, and you are absolutely included." Marcus felt a wave of relief followed immediately by a surge of anger. So Victoria was lying. I don't know what's going on with your sister, Linda said, but you need to know that this cruise is for all of our children. Period. Let me get your father on the phone. Robert's voice was stern when he joined the call. Marcus, I want you to listen to me very carefully. Your mother and I planned this cruise as a family vacation. We want all four of our children there, regardless of their relationship status. I have no idea why Victoria would tell you otherwise, but it's completely untrue. The conversation continued for another 20 minutes, with Marcus's parents reassuring him that he was absolutely included in the cruise plans. They seemed genuinely upset that Victoria had told him otherwise, and Robert even suggested that they should all have a family meeting to clear up any confusion. As Marcus hung up the phone, he felt a complex mix of emotions. Relief that he wasn't actually being excluded from the family trip. Anger at Victoria for lying to him, but also a growing sense of dread about what this meant for his relationship with his sister. Why would Victoria lie about something like this? What could she possibly gain from trying to exclude him from the family cruise? The more Marcus thought about it, the more questions he had and the fewer answers he could find. The next morning, Marcus woke up with a clearer head and a determination to get to the bottom of Victoria's deception. He decided to approach the situation methodically, the same way he would approach a complex problem at work. First, he wanted to understand the timeline of events. Victoria had claimed that their parents had made this decision about the cruise being couples only. But when had she supposedly learned about this? Marcus went back through their family group texts and email chains, looking for any mention of relationship status or couples activities. What he found only deepened his confusion. In all the months of planning, there had been no mention of the cruise being anything other than a family vacation. Jake's girlfriend Sarah had been mentioned exactly once, when Jake had asked if guests could bring a plus one. Robert had responded that they'd need to check with the cruise line about cabin arrangements and pricing for additional guests. Marcus also found several messages from Victoria herself that contradicted her recent claims. In one email from April, she had written, "This is going to be such a wonderful family bonding experience. I can't wait to spend quality time with all of you." In another message, she had specifically commented on activities that would be fun for the whole family, including several suggestions that would only make sense if she assumed Marcus would be there. The evidence was clear that Victoria's story about the cruise being couples only was a recent fabrication. But this only raised more questions about her motivations. Why would she lie about something so easily disproven? And why would she specifically target Marcus for exclusion? Marcus decided to reach out to Jake and Amanda to see if Victoria had told them anything about the supposed change in plans. Jake's response was immediate and confused. "What are you talking about? Of course you're coming on the cruise. Sarah and I aren't even that serious, and I wasn't planning to bring her anyway. Amanda's response was similar. Marcus, I have no idea what Victoria told you, but this is absolutely a family trip. Mike is excited to get to know everyone better, but the whole point is for our family to spend time together. The responses from his younger siblings confirmed what Marcus had already suspected. Victoria's story was completely fabricated, but they also revealed something else that made Marcus even more suspicious. According to Jake, he hadn't actually confirmed that Sarah would be coming on the cruise. And according to Amanda, Mike was looking forward to getting to know the family better, which suggested that the cruise wasn't designed around existing couple dynamics. Marcus decided he needed to confront Victoria directly. He sent her a text message asking if they could meet for coffee that afternoon to discuss the cruise situation. Her response was quick. I think we've already covered everything we need to cover. The decision has been made. The dismissive tone of Victoria's message only fueled Marcus's determination to understand what was happening. He decided to drive to Victoria's office that afternoon and wait for her to finish work. If she wouldn't meet him voluntarily, he'd find another way to get answers. Marcus arrived at Victoria's building around 4:30 p.m. and positioned himself in the lobby where he could see the elevators. He'd been waiting for about 20 minutes when he spotted Victoria walking toward the exit. She was dressed in one of her typical work outfits, a tailored blazer and skirt that probably cost more than Marcus spent on clothes in 3 months. Victoria, Marcus called out as she approached the revolving door. She turned around and Marcus could see a flash of something, surprise, annoyance, maybe even guilt cross her face before she composed herself. Marcus, what are you doing here? We need to talk, Marcus said simply. I spoke with Mom and Dad yesterday, and they told me a very different story about the cruise than the one you gave me. Victoria's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. I don't know what you're talking about. You lied to me, Marcus said, keeping his voice calm but firm. You told me that Mom and Dad decided to make the cruise couples only and that I wasn't invited. But when I called them, they had no idea what I was talking about. Victoria glanced around the lobby, clearly uncomfortable with having this conversation in such a public place. Look, Marcus, there are things you don't understand about the family dynamics around this trip. Then explain them to me, Marcus said. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you deliberately tried to exclude me from a family vacation for reasons I can't begin to understand. Victoria was quiet for a long moment and Marcus could see her weighing her options. Finally, she sighed. Fine, let's go get coffee, but I want you to understand that this conversation doesn't change anything. They walked to a nearby Starbucks in relative silence. Marcus ordered a simple black coffee while Victoria got some complicated drink with multiple modifications. They found a corner table away from the main flow of customers. "Okay," Marcus said once they were seated. "I want to understand what's really going on here. Why did you lie to me about the cruise?" Victoria stirred her drink slowly, not meeting Marcus's eyes. "I didn't lie exactly. I was trying to manage the situation." "Manage what situation?" "Marcus, you have to understand that this cruise is important to me. It's important to all of us, but maybe for different reasons than you think." Marcus felt his patience starting to fray. "Victoria, you're being deliberately vague. Just tell me what's going on." Victoria finally looked up at him, and Marcus was surprised to see something that looked almost like vulnerability in her expression. "Do you remember when we were kids, how family vacations used to go?" The question caught Marcus off guard. "What do you mean?" "I mean, do you remember how you were always the center of attention? How Mom and Dad would plan everything around what you wanted to do, what you were interested in?" Marcus stared at his sister, trying to process what she was saying. "Victoria, I was a kid. We were all kids." "But you were always the special one," Victoria continued, her voice gaining intensity. "The smart one, the responsible one, the one who could do no wrong. Do you have any idea what it was like being your older sister and constantly feeling like I was living in your shadow?" The conversation had taken a turn that Marcus hadn't expected. He'd come here looking for answers about the cruise, but Victoria seemed to be talking about childhood grievances that he'd never even known existed. "I don't understand what this has to do with the cruise," Marcus said carefully. "It has everything to do with the cruise," Victoria replied. "This is supposed to be a celebration of Mom and Dad's anniversary, but I know exactly what's going to happen. You're going to take over the planning, you're going to be the one organizing activities, and you're going to be the center of attention the whole time, just like always." Marcus felt a surge of anger. "Victoria, I've been helping with the planning because I enjoy it and because I'm good at it. I'm not trying to take over anything." "That's exactly what I'm talking about," Victoria said. "You don't even realize you're doing it. You just naturally assume that you should be the one in charge, that your ideas are the best, that everyone wants to follow your lead." "That's not true," Marcus protested. "I've been trying to include everyone in the planning. I created a shared document so we could all contribute ideas." "A shared document that you created and that you control," Victoria pointed out. "Marcus, you sent 17 emails about cruise planning in the past month. 17. You've researched every restaurant, every activity, every shore excursion. You've basically planned the entire trip without giving anyone else a chance to contribute meaningfully." Marcus felt defensive. "I was trying to be helpful. I thought everyone would appreciate having the research done. But that's just it, Victoria said. You assumed that your way of approaching the planning was what everyone wanted. You didn't ask if people wanted to do their own research or if they had their own ideas about how to organize the trip. The accusation stung because Marcus could see that there might be some truth to it. He had thrown himself into the cruise planning with typical enthusiasm, and he had made a lot of decisions without explicitly asking for input from his siblings. "Okay," Marcus said slowly. "I can see how my approach might have been overwhelming, but that still doesn't explain why you lied to me about being excluded from the trip." Victoria's expression hardened again. "Because I want this cruise to be special for me too. I want to be able to enjoy it without feeling like I'm competing with you for attention or approval." "But lying to me and trying to exclude me isn't the solution," Marcus said. "If you had concerns about the planning, you should have talked to me directly." "Would you have listened?" Victoria asked. "Or would you have just explained to me why your way was better?" The question hit Marcus harder than he expected. He wanted to immediately deny it, but something in Victoria's tone made him pause and consider whether there was truth to what she was saying. "I would have listened," Marcus said finally, though he wasn't entirely sure he believed it himself. Victoria looked skeptical. "Marcus, last Christmas, when we were planning the gift exchange, you basically rewrote the entire system I had suggested because you thought your way was more efficient. You didn't ask me how I felt about the changes. You just implemented them." Marcus remembered the incident she was referring to. He had thought he was being helpful by streamlining the gift exchange process, but he was starting to realize that Victoria had experienced it as him dismissing her ideas and taking over. "I'm sorry," Marcus said. "I didn't realize how that came across." "That's part of the problem," Victoria replied. "You never realize how it comes across because you're always so focused on the task at hand that you don't pay attention to how other people are feeling." They sat in silence for a few minutes, both processing the conversation. Marcus was beginning to understand that this wasn't really about the cruise at all. It was about years of family dynamics that he'd been oblivious to. "Victoria," Marcus said finally, "I want to understand how to fix this. If my behavior has been making you feel excluded or overshadowed, I want to change that. But lying to me about the cruise isn't the way to address it." Victoria's expression softened slightly. "I know lying wasn't the right approach. I was just. I was desperate to find a way to enjoy this trip without feeling like I was competing with you." "But you're not competing with me," Marcus said. "I don't think of our relationship as a competition." "Maybe you don't," Victoria said, "but I do. I always have." The admission hung in the air between them. Marcus felt a wave of sadness as he realized how much pain his sister had been carrying without him even knowing it. "What can I do to change that?" Marcus asked. Victoria was quiet for a long moment. "I don't know," she said finally. "This has been going on for so long that I'm not sure how to stop feeling this way." Marcus felt the weight of the revelation. All these years, he'd thought he had a good relationship with his sister, but he'd been completely unaware of the resentment and competition she'd been feeling. "Are you still planning to come on the cruise?" Marcus asked. "I don't know," Victoria said. "I was hoping that if you weren't there, I could just enjoy the trip without dealing with these feelings. But now that Mom and Dad know what I did, I'm not sure how to face them." Marcus understood her dilemma. By lying about their parents' intentions, Victoria had created a situation that would be difficult to resolve gracefully. "We need to tell them the truth," Marcus said. "All of us together, and we need to figure out how to move forward as a family." Victoria nodded reluctantly. "I know. I just don't know how to explain why I did something so stupid." "You did it because you were hurting," Marcus said. "That doesn't make it right, but it makes it understandable." They finished their coffee in relative silence, both lost in thought about the complex family dynamics that had been revealed. As they prepared to leave, Marcus felt a mixture of hurt, understanding, and determination to find a way to repair their relationship. The drive home gave Marcus time to process everything Victoria had told him. He found himself replaying not just their conversation, but years of family interactions through this new lens. How many times had he unknowingly steamrolled over his siblings' ideas or preferences? How many times had he assumed his way was the best way without considering other perspectives? Marcus realized that Victoria's accusations about his behavior weren't entirely unfounded. He did tend to take charge of situations, and he did have a tendency to research things thoroughly, and then present his findings as the obvious best choice. What he'd always thought of as being helpful and organized, Victoria had experienced as controlling and dismissive. But even as he acknowledged his own contribution to the family dynamics, Marcus still felt hurt by Victoria's deception. Lying to him about being excluded from the cruise had been cruel, regardless of her underlying motivations. And involving their parents in the lie, or at least claiming to, had been particularly hurtful. That evening, Marcus called his parents to update them on his conversation with Victoria. Robert answered the phone, and Marcus could hear the tension in his father's voice. "Did you get to the bottom of what Victoria was thinking?" Robert asked without preamble. Marcus summarized his conversation with Victoria, trying to be fair to both her concerns and his own feelings. He explained about Victoria's feelings of competition and being overshadowed, but also about his hurt at being lied to. I'm disappointed in Victoria, Robert said when Marcus finished. Whatever issues she has with family dynamics, lying about our intentions was completely inappropriate. I know, Dad, but I also think there's some truth to what she's saying about my behavior. I have been pretty intense.